Hey everybody, Mike here. We are doing our little spring break thing, so no new things, but we're reviewing a couple classics, including this, our first interview ever, with Steven Costello, who has since gone on to be series director or race director or competition director or some sort of director for Pirelli Trophy West, the GT3 Cup Series. So give it a listen, and don't forget to rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on all our social medias. We're at CamAutomag. And support us on Patreon, patreon.com/CamAutomag.
Last time we sat down and had any sort of length of conversation, we were talking about restoring the F1 cars, and that's when you said, I think it was you were a mechanic for Ligier? Or...
Yeah, actually...
like, this is the kind of stuff I want to talk to, because you're the soft-spoken man in the red Formula car. A lot of people are going to lose their mind when they hear, oh, somebody who worked on a Formula One car recently.
I was very lucky. As a kid, I have always loved Formula One. In fact, I wrote to Enzo Ferrari when I was 10 and told him I was coming as his next American world champion. Well, didn't quite work out that way. But I've always loved Formula cars. And I had been working for some years with Tom Walkinshaw Racing with the Jaguar sports car team, both with the IMSA team in the United States doing Camel GT and then the Group C team in Europe. And when Tom became involved with the Benetton team through Flavio Briatore during the Schumacher era, Flavio also got controlling interest of Ligier. So all of a sudden there was an opportunity for Tom Walkinshaw personnel to go to Ligier at a management level. So at the same time, our IMSA GTP team was winding down in 1993-94 because
all good things must come to an end, especially when you have...
partly the championship was going away. It was in decline, sadly.
Tragically.
And Jaguar had just been purchased by Ford, and they opted to spend their money on golf tournaments versus sports car racing.
Wise investment.
Maybe for their target demographic.
But
all of a sudden, we ended up going from an IMSA GTP team to running the Fastmasters program on live television at Indianapolis Raceway Park with retired race drivers in Jaguar XJ220s. That's a whole other story. But basically, all these guys were very competitive, very good race car drivers. Couldn't see a darn thing at night and wouldn't put their glasses on. So of the 14 cars we had, 12 were destroyed.
Well,
But I digress here. And during the Fastmasters program, I talked with Tom, who I always got along with very well, and said I would love to be part of either Benetton or Ligier. Next thing I know, 5 of us are shipped off to France. And I went as the sub-assembly manager. The reality is we became the test team. So Tony Dow became team manager at Ligier. Ian Reed went as a chief engineer. I went along with Peter Hodgkinson. Peter's now the head of build at Mercedes F1.
Oh, well, he's a slight step up.
He's done very well for a young Kiwi. And Peter and I went in management positions, but the reality is we became the test team. So over the course of 94, 95, we did all of the testing for both the JS9B, which was the Renault-powered car, with Penny and Eric Bernard. And then the following year with the JS40, which was the Mugen Honda-powered car, with Martin Brundle, Agori Suzuki, and Olivier Penny. Peter and I would typically run the first car of each production run as a test car, and then we would build the third car, which then became the number one driver's primary car. So we were fairly busy.
Yeah.
We were there were about 5 of us who were English speaking, 125 French personnel, but we all got along really well.
I have So I think that's a great place to just kind of dive in, because the reason I'm doing these interviews is there are a lot of, people will see the stories that I write and, the pictures, and it's really like, well, that they are here,
right?
But there's a whole story about where they came from, and that's really what I want to get into, and I wanted to start with you because, I think you might have some of the most interesting stories of anyone out here.
I have been fortunate to have a fantastic career.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, I started race driving in a Formula V 2 weeks after I turned 18 at Lime Rock.
Yeah.
I was the youngest SCCA New England region driver. Fortunately, it had just become eligible for 18-year-olds. And I haven't done anything since in 42 years, but work on either run teams. I've been very fortunate to make my passion my livelihood.
Yeah. You turn something that most people would just love to spend a weekend or two doing. You've done it for the better. You've done it for 4 decades.
Yeah. It's I've been very fortunate.
Yeah.
Although, having said that, it's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, it's not all sunshine and roses.
No. And I think the famous quote is motorsports is like 85% hard work, 10% good stuff, and 5% you don't even want to know about.
Yeah, there is. I started listening to a podcast that's about drifting, sliding around, and they were talking to one driver. They were asking about, well, how much time do you think you spend with sponsors and working on your car versus how much time do you actually spend driving?
Yes.
And one of the hosts, while this conversation's going on, he's sitting there, you can hear him writing it out. He's like, yeah, during a given season, you're probably driving maybe 2 hours.
Yeah.
In all, and how long?
Drifting.
He's like, and how long have you been working on the car just tonight?
Right.
I don't want to talk about it.
Well, even that's the case here with our open wheel racing on the Saturday, which is fantastic that we have that opportunity. But the reality is you've got maybe an hour and a half of driving per month.
Yeah.
Unless you do the Friday test day, which adds another hour and a half. So, you're looking at 3 hours potentially a month over 6 months.
Yeah, and then you're in the garage.
And you're in the garage a lot.
Yes. Oh, yes.
I suspect it's a lot like a helicopter where you have 40 hours of work for every hour of driving.
Oh, yeah. Or it's almost like, well, you don't want to own a boat. You want to know somebody who owns a boat. It's like,
yes.
I don't necessarily want to own a race car. I just want to know people who own race cars because...
Well,
yeah, I don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time or any more time than what I've spent on trying to do stuff to my Supra. Yeah.
It's a pretty powerful addiction.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I can imagine. So, we mentioned before we started recording being at Le Mans.
Yes.
So, a lot of people who listen, they love Formula One, so we're definitely going to circle back to that. But I'm a sports car guy. I love Le Mans. So let's talk about the Waukesha days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it actually goes before that. I was very involved because I was working for the Tiger Van Diemen importer, which was Essex Racing in Atlanta. I had come to an arrangement with them to drive a factory Van Diemen in Canada in a Formula 4 2000 championship. And that led to me becoming the workshop manager for Essex Racing. Yeah. And as I say, we were the Tiger and Van Diemen importers. Constant number of cars being built and raced all over the United States. But we became very actively involved with the initial Camel Lights cars, with a little Mazda Tiger with a 13B rotary in it. Yeah. And I was lucky enough to run a program for Essex with Steve Durst, Michael Brockman, Deborah Gregg, and Jim Truman at Daytona, 24-hour in '86. And that led to me doing an awful lot of sports car racing. I actually was still driving Formula cars, but was making my living with sports car racing.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Oh, but no. This is
So
this story goes back a bit further than I had anticipated.
Well, yes, we ran Daytona in '86. We're leading when tragically the motor let go at about 1 o'clock in the morning, like it does.
Yeah, this is one is wont to do.
With Jim Truman driving, who was the owner of Red Roof Inns and the sponsor of Bobby Ray Hall. It was Jim Truman's last race. Sadly, he passed away that spring with cancer. But he had a good run.
Hey.
I then looked after Durst and Brockman for the remainder of the season. We ended up winning at Mid-Ohio and then again the Columbus Grand Prix. At the same time, the newest car in Camel Lights in '86 was the Spice Fiero Pontiac.
That.
Fantastic car. Well, in the fall of '86, Durst and Brockman and I decided we would buy the Entec car, the famous Bob Earl car, which we did buy and ran at the first half of the '87 season as the Jiffy Lube car. It was painted in maroon. It was an absolutely gorgeous car. Come June of '87, I was invited by the Spice Factory team to become the race engineer in Camel Lights. So that sounds like a real big term, but what it means is I was the crew chief. I had one other guy on the number 6 car, which was Charles Morgan and Jim Rothbarth.
Well, at the time, Spice says, "Hey, come be our come engineer for us." That's a big calling. That's a big call.
It was a fantastic opportunity, and all of this happened in Atlanta, which was a real hotbed for sports car racing at the time in the IMSA world.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky to ride this incredible wave. The upshot of that is I was with Spice Engineering for the second half of the '87 season, all the way through the '88 season, ran the V8 cars in '89 with Costas Loss, Wayne Taylor, Scott Etchison. Also did all of the IMSA races in '89 and 6 of the Group C races, one of which was Le Mans, which was a disaster. We had raced the V8 car, the GTP car, in Mid-Ohio, so I flew directly from Mid-Ohio to England. Drove up to Silverstone to join Graham Humphreys, the designer. We then drove to France, took the ferry across, got to Le Mans, first practice session, rode off both cars. Literally. And we're retubbing the cars in the paddock because you couldn't exchange tubs back then. So all the damaged honeycomb components we had to unrivet. And the upshot of it is we did qualify. We did fairly well in qualifying with a little 3.5 liter DFL Group C1 car, but we had nothing but nightmare throughout the race. And I think at the time I was in France 5 days and I had 11 hours total sleep.
Well, I
was young.
Hey, there you go. Well, you bounced back.
Well, we did bounce back, and then we went to Harama and set both cars on fire because it was so hot. But that's another story.
I show up to Le Mans, you write off both cars. Next time around, you set the cars on fire. You like to make an entrance, it sounds like.
Well, it was the 3.5 liter DFL Cosworth engine was a derivative of the DFV Formula One engine, but it had a particularly bad harmonic in it, and it would destroy anything that was electrical. Snap off alternator brackets, take the internals right out of the starter motor.
Little things that you may or may not need over the course of a race.
Yeah, and in fact, we couldn't get the car. At that time, you had to turn the car off in pit stops, and it had to start by itself. And we couldn't keep, because of the vibration, we couldn't keep a Bendix on the starter shaft.
Oh, good Lord.
So here we are, we've written off both cars at Le Mans, But we still have the problem where it wouldn't start after the first pit stop anyway. So Steve Conover, another American race engineer who's very active with Flying Lizard still and has been around, good friend, been around a long time.
Yeah, he's still hanging on.
Yeah, he and I took, this is going to sound funny, but we took a couple of spare rear anti-roll bar cables that we had. We made a couple of forks out of some fabricated steel. And then we took some of the broken wing mountings and a little bit of nylon and made this lever arm that was riveted to the passenger side of the tub. So for the drivers to actually start the cars in the pit stop, they had to push this lever forward, which engaged this little fork, which pushed the Bendix into the flywheel. And then they could push the button, and it would start.
That is, necessity is the mother of invention. And
those two brackets and pieces that were done in the paddock at Le Mans are still on those cars today in vintage racing.
Oh, that is fantastic. Oh, that is great.
That was fun.
Oh, well, hey, if it works.
Well, back then it was there was a lot of in-the-field modifications because the teams were relatively small.
Yeah, it's a completely different animal than what you see today.
Yeah, it is. But even back in '89 at Le Mans, it was full speed pit lane, no speed limits. The pit lane itself was just the width of a car. There were no garage areas like they are now. So you had literally, you would be servicing the car and you would have a race car zinging by you at 150 miles an hour in pit lane, and then even faster still on the racetrack, which was separated by one layer of Armco barrier.
Yeah, just a couple feet of Armco and a couple feet of tall Armco, and then, oh, hey, the front's straight.
Yeah. And they would have these French policemen would have these big, long orange cords, and they would corral the photographers and the media people away from the cars as they were coming in, and then open up a gap so that the cars could go back onto the hot pit lane.
Oh,
a lot of fun.
Completely. Oh, it's just worlds away from what you see today.
Yeah, absolutely. But that led, through Spice Engineering, I was invited to join TWR USA, which at the time was the factory Jaguar program. I was invited to join starting December of '89, so for the full 1990 and beyond. And the first year I was there, 1990, we had the Castrol cars in the United States and the Silk Cut cars
gorgeous cars
in Europe. And my first race with TWR, I was hired as a number one mechanic on the number one car, which was a bit of a step down from race engineering, but I wanted to win races.
Yes.
And I thought, who better than Tom Walkinshaw and Jaguar?
Yeah.
My first race was Daytona, 1990. I was leaping over the wall, changing tires, doing all of the things that you do to service a car in 24 hours.
Yeah.
Fantastic result. We finished first and second.
There we go.
With the Bayside Porsche 962 finishing third. I thought, wow, this is fantastic. This is what I'd wanted to do, to win big-time professional sports car races.
Yeah.
And that was with the big normally aspirated V12, the old Tony Southgate designed car, which was a bit of a truck, but it was fantastic doing 24-hour races. It kind of tripped all over itself in the street courses, and that's why we had a V6 turbo for all of the sprint races. So in the United States, we would run the V12s at Daytona and Sebring.
Yeah, the longer endurance races. Right.
And then the rest of the year, we would run the turbo cars. Yeah. So then our next race was Miami. And, of course, we were very full of ourselves, having just won Daytona.
Came out swinging.
Yeah. We had members of the royal family come over. We had all of the top executives from Jaguar, both the United States and the UK. were hoping that we would have a dominant race at Miami. The second car that Phil Denny was looking after managed to spit one of its cam pulleys on the way to the grid. So that was a DNS. My car that I was running managed to get through about half of the race before it expired. And that was a pretty typical problem we had, especially the first year with the turbo engines.
Yeah.
We just couldn't control the boost. So it literally just lifted the heads right off the blocks. For the second year, which would be 91, we got the Bosch Motronic system that they had used so effectively with the 962s. At the time, it was a lease. You couldn't buy it. It was $1 million a year to lease the management system, the ECUs. This was a very big budget racing back then.
Oh, yeah, I remember another podcast I listened to was Ryan Eversley. He did this. He's a sports car racer. He drives for Real Time Acura and World Challenge.
I used to work with his dad, John.
Yeah, he brings that up, and they would interview Tommy Kendall, and he interviewed the Taylor brothers, and he would always ask them about it. He's like, let's talk about the old IMSA days.
Well,
can we talk about your dad driving? He would, and when I heard that, I need to know about this. So I started looking that up. I'm like, oh, this was fantastic.
His dad Wayne drove for me in '89.
Yeah,
we did a special lightweight Spice GTP car, V8 car. It was blue. It was a gorgeous car, French racing blue. And Wayne and Scott Atchison shared it. And Wayne stuck it on the pole at Tampa and then again at Del Mar, which really was, besides my doing Le Mans with Spice and the Group C stuff, all of a sudden the car that I'm engineering and had built is on the pole for the 2 street races, and that was really a big push forward for TWR.
Oh, yeah, that's... I mean, you're going to pull anywhere is a feat. And he also talked to Tommy Kendall about the underpowered Intrepid.
Yes, but that car had phenomenal aero.
Oh, yeah.
And on a street course, it was something special.
Oh, yeah.
He had one of the most horrific accidents ever at Watkins Glen.
That was brutal is an understatement.
Brutal, yeah.
Yeah.
Sadly for me, 1990 ended with me being run over in pit lane by a tractor trailer just prior to the start of the Tampa Grand Prix. The car was up in the air. I was at the front watching the guys put the fuel in, make sure we were topped up with fuel. Race tires were going on, standing at the nose, getting ready to go to the grid. And the Barbara Sarb transporters went barreling down pit lane, counter course, and managed to run over me and the car. And so, medevac to Tampa General. That was not the best day.
We have some bad news. How bad is it? Well, it's not about you, it's about the car. Oh, that is...
That hurt.
Of all the things to be run over by on pit lane.
Pit lane, yeah. But that's the thing. When you're in pit lane and you've spent your entire life there, you're always looking up the track.
Yeah.
It's very rare that a vehicle will be going counter course, and it's so dangerous when someone does. Even in pit lane here at Miller, if someone inadvertently throws their car in reverse in pit lane and starts backing up, it's against all the rules of motorsports.
Yeah,
it's kind of like when you go to London for the first time and you look at the traffic the wrong way, and step out into the oncoming. So I missed Del Mar in 1990, but I was back in time for Daytona in 1991, and then we did the full IMSA seasons, 91, 92, and then the start of 93. Ended up with a class win in 92, finishing second to Nismo. We had the race covered in 93. We were leading by 21 laps when the engine let go. But we had fantastic drivers at TWR. We had Martin Brundle, Davy Jones, John Nielsen, Jan Lammers, Scott Pruitt, Scotty Goodyear, David Brabham, just a whole list of fantastic race drivers.
Just amazing drivers came through TWR.
Yeah. And then, well, this is kind of, sorry, I'm kind of rambling here, but
no, please ramble.
after we, Ford decided to spend their money on golf tournaments, we did the Fastmaster program. By this time, TWR USA was winding down. It was, in the end, about a half a dozen of us left. So we got contracted to Ligier, and we did all of the testing for the 94 season, but came back at the end of the summer and were standing around, and you can only play video games for so long.
Yeah.
So we, myself and Ian Reed, who was the chief engineer, we took a look at the XTR-14 car that we had raced in 92, which was the Ross Braun design, basically Formula One car with a roof.
Yeah.
Incredible machine. That's the car we raced in Camel GT. And we had all of the parts left over from that program and the Group C program that they had run prior. And we had just built up Teo Fabi's championship-winning car from 1991 as a show car that he was going to receive. Well, Ian and I were standing there in August deciding we have to do something.
Yeah.
And at the time, the new World Sports Car Championship was coming out, the flat-bottom, open-top sports cars. So we took one look at Teo Fabi's XTR-14, and so, we can make a flat-bottom sports car out of this. So literally, we got permission from Tom Walkinshaw. Literally took a Sawzall.
Hey, Tom, can we cut the roof off this thing?
Well, we took a Sawzall and cut the roof off of it. And, we couldn't use the Cosworth engine, the HB engines that we had for the XTR-14. So we built a tubular frame to simulate the engine, but basically we took Teo's championship-winning car from 1991 that Davey had raced in 1992 in IMSA, Davey Jones, converted it to flat floor by literally screwing the tunnels and cutting out and then making new bucks and building flat bottom. As I say, changed the roof line, changed the roll hoop, designed this car as a exercise and had presentations to both Audi and Porsche. Audi decided to go their own way. Porsche was looking for another Le Mans car. So they approved the build of these two WSC 95 sports cars. So at the time, as I say, there was about 5 of us working in the workshop at Tom Walkinshaw. We had 2 tubs. We had commissioned the bodywork being done. Porsche had decided to use their turbocharged 962 engine. We had to design, cast, and machine a bell housing adapter from their engine to the Jaguar gearbox, which was a front-loading 6-speed with a left-hand drive because the gear rod went straight through the cockpit to the gearbox. We had to build up, which I did, 5 car sets of all the wishbones, uprights, drive shafts, all the subassembly parts. My little group in subassembly, which I was heading, did all that. So basically what we did is took everything but the tub was a subassembly part. Yeah. So we would literally wheel it out in a cart of all the components to bolt to the tub. We built the 2 cars in the nick of time for Daytona testing. In 1995, we went to Daytona test with 2 cars. We had Hans Stuck, Terry Bootson, Bob Wallach driving 1 car, and Jeff Brabham. And then the other car, we had Scotty Goodyear, Scotty Pruitt, and Mario Andretti
You just, 3 random guys off the street.
Yeah, and I think Davy Jones was involved with that. I'm sure he was, although he was busy with doing IRL racing at the time. So we went to Daytona for the test in January, prior to the 24-hour. And IMSA, as they do, had a rule change just prior to us loading up to go to the race. They gave us such a small turbo restrictor that Porsche said, that's it.
You forget it.
We're not going. They were also busy building the Cayenne at the time, so the several millions of dollars that we would have spent racing went to the Cayenne.
Went to the thing so they could continue to build sports cars that fly in the face of physics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which has turned out to be a profit center for them, so it was a good decision. So all of a sudden we come in on, at this time we had about 20 guys from Porsche helping, and they were all in Valparaiso with us. We had a great little program. We came in the decision was made on a Monday morning in Daytona. We were in the Chicago area, so we were an hour behind them. So we came into work 8 o'clock on Monday morning. Yeah. Program is disbanded.
That's...
So... So the upshot was the cars ended up going to the Porsche Museum.
That's good.
They sat there for a year. Literally as we had run them at the Daytona test and preparing for the 95 Daytona 24-hour. Well, Reinhold Jost, who was a Porsche team owner and contractor to Porsche for many, many years, Reinhold Jost asked the Porsche factory if he could run the cars in 1996. And they said, sure, why not? Because Porsche, the factory itself, were developing the GT1 car, which was a derivative of the 911.
Yeah,
but it was a mid-engine car.
Yeah, the quote-unquote 911 that shared only, I think, a front subframe with the road-going car.
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit of the floor, too.
Yeah, that was a ridiculous era.
And that was Norbert Singer's baby.
Yeah.
The sports car side, the WSC car, although Norbert was involved with it, super guy, that was really being driven by Max Welty, who was a name from the past. He was the team manager at Sauber back when they were doing the Mercedes sports cars. Max was and is an extraordinary team manager. Anyway, Max was the powerhouse between the 95 WSC car. The upshot of this is they took the 2 cars that we had built at TWR USA, went to Le Mans, and won. And they won with the original car that I had cut the roof off, which was Teo Fabi's championship-winning car from 1991.
Just a 5-year-old car that somebody took a Sawzall to.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, an enormous amount of work.
Well, yeah.
But the uprights were all the Jaguar stuff, the wishbones, the torsion bars, all of this stuff had all of this Jaguar DNR, but it's badged now, DNA, but it's badged now as a Porsche. And then, oddly enough, come 1997, the same car repeats.
Yep.
So extraordinary back-to-back wins by the one chassis that had won the World Championship in 1991.
It just can't keep a winner down.
No. Reinhold Jost still has those cars in his personal collection.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh.
But that we had an amazing run from... Well, Jaguar TWR did, starting in 88 when they won Daytona the first time and Le Mans the first time. They had an amazing run in the 24-hour racing.
Oh, yeah.
And it was fantastic to be part of it.
Yeah, you were... If there's anyone involved, you came in at a great time.
Yeah.
You got the Camel GT, and then you built the WSC car. It was myself, Peter Hodgkinson again. Ian Reed was the designer. Dave Fullerton came in as a designer. Dave is still actively involved, doing primarily Porsche race engineering. Dave Stevens was around, who's still involved. And then we had Deadly Serious Mike, who was our electronics man. But that was it. That was the core group. And, of course, Tony Dow is the team manager. Yeah.
amazing what you can do with half a dozen guys who want to get on with it.
Yeah.
And of course, Vic Warren was operations manager, so all of the stuff that no one wanted to deal with, which was the transporter and the spare parts and the pit lane stuff, he would look after.
Yeah. When you have a small group of guys who are all heading towards the same thing, it's amazing what you can get done.
Well, what's really funny is this whole drama started with sports cars with Essex Racing. So we, in 2003, Michael Gouet, who owned Essex Racing, asked me if I would help at Daytona. We were running 2 SRP2 cars for Team Seattle. So it was kind of like a 20-year reunion from when I started with Essex. And at that time, Tony Dow was involved, Vic Warren was involved, I was involved, Mark Redwan was involved from TWR. So it was like a high school gathering.
Like the best 20-year reunion you could possibly have.
Well, it got better because we ended up winning first and second in SRP2, finishing 6th and 7th overall. Of course, that was the year that Kevin Buckler won it with a Porsche. It was the first year of the Daytona prototypes, and they all failed.
Yeah. Well,
but it was a pretty good reunion for Daytona.
Not bad at all. Yeah. Man.
Well, we after the WSC car went to the Porsche Museum, then we all got bundled back up and went back to Ligier. And that's when we did the JS41, which was basically very similar to the Benetton that Schumacher was driving. He had the Renault engines. We had the Mugen Hondas.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful car. Frank Durney designed. But once again, a small program.
Yeah, but still a small Formula One program is still, still a Formula One program.
Yeah. So that kind of wound down a little bit, and at that time I was looking to do something where I was in complete control. A good friend of mine is Dominic Dobson, and he and I had worked together in sports car racing, and I had assisted him in every one of the 7 Indy 500s that he had done. TWR and Spice were both very flexible. If I had an off weekend from sports cars, I was allowed to go engineer on Dominic's Indy cars. So I would do qualifying with him every year at Indy, and he always qualified. And invariably, I would have a sports car race at Lime Rock on the Indy 500 weekend. Naturally. But in '93, because our Group C program, our GTP program was winding down, I got to do Indy 500. And that was the most incredible experience to actually push the car out of Gasoline Alley onto the pit straight to go to the grid with 300,000, 400,000 people staring at you. Yeah. Your hair goes up in the back of your head. But it was, and that was full speed pit stops back then. I was doing the outside rear tire. Unfortunately, the car we were running was a Gelmer, which was a pretty slow car. Yeah. And the car had actually been bought out of the cruise auction in April. But
not the ideal place.
Not the ideal place.
But especially a month before.
But we got it in the show, and we got to the end. But what it really led to was the introduction of Bruce McCaw and Tom Armstrong to Indianapolis. And they became the principals behind Pac West Racing Group, which became a long-time kart entrant.
Yes.
Well, come December, Christmas time of '95, Dominic calls me and says, we got the deal to do the Dodge Stratus touring cars as Pac West Touring Car Group. Do you want to be race engineer or do you want to be team manager? And I thought, I had done race engineering, I had done team management, but I really wanted to be the team manager of this program. So we signed a deal at the Detroit Auto Show in January of '96. Literally, I went from the signing at Auburn Hills,
Yeah.
Chrysler Tech Center, to a small workshop on Gasoline Alley in Indianapolis. Had to shovel snow away from the door to get in. Totally empty shop.
Yeah.
No employees, no trucks, no race cars.
Just
The upshot was we ended up building 2 cars, did 27 days of testing before the first race, fully staffed, brought in Michael Harvey, who is team manager at Fall Line, as my crew chief, chief mechanic, Ron Mathis as a race engineer, Dave Finch, who is still active, many-time SCCA national champion, as race engineer and consultant, Melanie Carell as my office manager, who is still involved with timing and scoring. She works for Corvette and has probably 8 Le Mans wins now. So I really stacked the deck with quality people. We built the first... I ended up over the 2 years of the Super Touring Championship building 6 cars in conjunction with Renard and the Chrysler Tech Center. Our 2 drivers were Dominic Dobson and David Donahue. We won our first races at Lime Rock in 1996, and then went on to win the Drivers' Championship with David Donahue in 1997. Fantastic. We were a support series to kart, but in a lot of ways we did a lot of the fan-friendly things that now happen. We had driver signings, we had hero cards, we had grid walks. All of this stuff came from the Super Touring series.
Yeah, like all the stuff that you see in the big series today
came from there.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was directly stolen from the British Touring Car Championship, which was incredible back in the mid-90s. Yeah.
That was the high time for the British touring cars.
Yeah, we were very lucky to be able to do the touring car. It was a fantastic series, but sadly, it had been subsidized by Foresight Racing. They put the seed money into it, and they had hoped that the manufacturers, Honda, Toyota, Chrysler, Ford, would all get behind it in the United States. And they did to a degree, but not enough for it to be self-sustaining.
Yeah.
So it went away after 2 seasons. And if it had just held on for another year or 2, that's when the start of the tuner craze started. And if
that would have been perfect.
Can you imagine?
Oh, that would have been great. Because for a lot of guys of my generation, it was we wanted little Hondas, or Toyotas, or Nissans, or whatever, and it was drag racing, or because maybe autocross, because actually racing would we had nothing really to look at. I mean, I remember the cars I was listing after they looked like regular cars. It was the old JGTC cars, which they looked like Supras and Skylines and other things, but they definitely were not.
No, and they had some pretty intense aero add-ons and wheel and tires.
Oh, yeah. Even to this day, it's still... Those cars are still pretty crazy. But, yeah, I mean, there was no... I mean, could maybe watch some British touring car or world touring car or something, but it was still so far away.
Right.
It would have been great. Things would have definitely been different if we had a touring car series with cars like, there's an Accord, or there's a Civic, or there's...
Right. In a lot of ways, that model was adopted by the World Challenge series.
Yeah.
Some of the touring car races, well, I think all of them are on YouTube right now from 96, 97. And it's pretty interesting to look back and see how trend-setting that series was. But sadly, it went away, so there I am.
Unfortunately.
I've got a team of excellent sports car people. We really thought we were going to get a Viper program for the following season, which would have been 98. But Hugh DeShornack decided to keep that in-house at Orca.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, I've got 14 people plus contractors. We get the call on December 5th from Chrysler Motorsports Congratulations, PacWest. You're now a NASCAR truck team.
Okay.
Okay. So I've got a whole building full of sports car people.
And they want you to build a tube-frame truck to turn left.
Exactly. And we have, it would be a one-truck team. Dominic Dobson was to be the driver. David, after his championship with us in the Stratus, did go off to drive with Orica and actually had a class win at Daytona. Yeah. We were able to, part of the obligation with accepting this NASCAR program was that we had to be at the first race, which was the first week in January at Disney World. They had an oval there.
Yeah.
So we ended up having to buy 5 trucks from Kurt Rohrig, who had been running a Dodge factory program. His program had gone away, and it was fortunate for us we were able to buy some equipment, and that really helped us get started.
Yeah.
But we had, we had no equipment. We had a tractor trailer that we couldn't actually fit a NASCAR truck into.
So it was...
Yeah. Upshot is we show up at Disney. Dominic destroys the first truck in practice, getting used to it. Rich Bickle, who was an old-time NASCAR driver, was there. He had a provisional start for the first race, so we hired Rich Bickle to drive our spare truck. He ended up finishing 10th, and we were the highest-placing Dodge.
There we go.
Ahead of the Petties and ahead of the Keselowskis. So anyway, but that was an extremely hard season to get through. It was... You end up destroying your equipment at just about every race. You need to cycle through 5 to 8 trucks per year.
Yeah.
And we tried to do it in Indianapolis, which was kind of a mistake. We should have been Charlotte-based.
Yeah, that, unfortunately.
But we got through it, and in the end, the truck was the MCI Wilcom truck.
Yeah.
And
a company a lot of people who might be listening to this will not remember.
Yes, and it was the year they got, well, they say it was merged with WorldCom, but it was actually a hostile takeover.
Yeah.
So it didn't, at the end of the season, the sponsorship went away.
Yeah.
Basically, that was the end. We did NASCAR for a year and a half. And then I ended up getting hired by Hogan Racing, which was a kart racing team, to run the second team. We had Helio Castroneves as the first driver and Luis Garcia Jr. as the second driver. Yeah. So I came in to run the second team, and basically had about 3 weeks to staff it and get the equipment and get it up and running.
Yeah, well, it's...
Yeah. I had a lot more energy then.
And then...
But that was the glory days from the 80s to 90s. It was really a pretty amazing period to be in motorsports.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much anywhere. I mean, you saw a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I was lucky.
Yeah. You saw some amazing sports car racing, Formula One racing, and then it is my one and only goal.
Yeah.
In as far as I am dealing with motorsports as a fan, as a quasi-media member, whatever, I want to go to the Indianapolis 500.
Well, this is the year. This is the 100th anniversary. I've just been contacted about actually running one of the parade cars there.
Oh, wow.
So I'm hoping that all comes through.
Yeah.
It would be a roadster from the 60s.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, though, I've had a great professional career, but my driving in the 70s and early 80s, when it was primarily Formula Fords, it was the most rough and tumble racing you could imagine. I was racing with Michael Andretti, John Andretti, Scotty Goodyear, John Paul Jr., Scott Brayton. Yeah. A lot of guys that actually were able to step up and go all the way.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Getting your start, and then because again, we see you racing the little red Formula car out here. But,
yeah, it's been fun to come back to what what I originally loved about the sport, which is the driving.
Yeah, just getting out there and hunting for that elusive apex.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you hit it.
Every once in a while, Yeah, so,
but actually, it's what I knew as a youngster that I always wanted to be. So I spent a lot of time babysitting and mowing lawns to get my first racing go-kart, which I did when I was 12.
yeah.
And I raced that for many years. And then as soon as I was eligible to race in SCCA, I bought a Formula V. And I had no money. But I was able to take out a loan for a Formula V. And raced that for my first season, got my licenses, sold that, got a second Formula V, was able to get my SCCA National. At the same time, I was an instructor at the School of High Performance Driving, which is still owned by Tony Scotti. We did all of the police academies and a lot of executive protection driving. We're based at Thompson Speedway. That company morphed into the Skip Barber School. So I was one of the 2 instructors at the very first Skip Barber School in 1975. Skip and I didn't get along. But he has a fantastic program.
Oh, yeah, great.
And then the other instructor, Richard Messier at the School of High Performance Driving, was a very active Formula Ford racer in the Northeast. We decided that, the next logical step from Formula Ford was Formula 5000.
Yeah.
So Richard bought a rolling chassis from Fred Opert of a Chevron BT24-28 Formula 5000 car, which was a Peter Gethin car. He was working, his day job was at an engine building shop in New Hampshire. So we built up a 5-liter Chevy, put this thing all together, and went off to go Formula 5000 racing like the Beverly Hillbillies, open trailer up to Mossport. And there we are racing against Brian Redmond, Peter Gethin, and all the stars of Formula 5000 at the time. Of course, we didn't have a clue. The engine ended up blowing up. But at the time, we had the elusive sponsor, which was going to be a CB radio company.
Oh.
And, all this money was going to roll in. Richard was going to get a new Lola, and I was going to get the Chevron to drive. Yeah, I'm 19 years old, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, how bad can this be? But I had to get an FIA license, so I promptly went off and bought a Formula Ford, took it to Lime Rock, broke my legs, had to be cut out of the thing.
Strong first outing.
Happy 20th birthday to me. And then the upshot was the sponsor went away, the money never came, the Lola never came, the Chevron got raced a couple of more times, and then got converted into a single-seat Can-Am car for 1978 that Bill Tempero raced and finished 5th in the championship with. So, and then I recovered from. Yeah, I've had a couple broken legs in racing. Recovered from that and raced actively in the Northeast. All the way to 82, and then moved to Atlanta for the Essex Racing School. Yeah.
So
it was a rough world back then. We couldn't get through a Formula Ford race without a red flag, and then we would all get a lecture from the chief steward, especially at Lime Rock. He would stand up. There was a little bridge that projected out into the front straight.
And he would just be up there.
He would be up there looking down on all us Formula Ford guys saying, you guys need to behave.
You guys need to figure this out.
And then we would go 5 wide into turn 1 and literally off into the trees.
And he would just be up there, just shaking his head.
Yeah. There's a famous photograph from back then. It's Tom Davey, and he's in a Van Diemen, and it's in the S's at Lime Rock, a race I was in. And he had touched another car, which I think was Tom Gaffney, and had hot laps, which was about to be a movie about Formula Ford racing. Big bold letters on the side of his Van Diemen. And there's this photograph of him upside down, parallel to the ground, perfectly parallel. The car he'd touched underneath him, and this photo was perfectly squared up.
Oh, fantastic.
Tom Davey upside down.
Oh, good.
He was a fantastic Formula Ford driver. Then he's a couple-time SCCA national champion.
Yeah. You know, anytime you get inverted like that, you can't have that be the highlight of the career. You gotta go on.
Yeah, the brakes don't work when you're upside down.
Nope.
But it was, I absolutely loved racing Formula Fords in the 70s and 80s because it was still accessible. You could still do it.
Yeah.
And maybe have an apartment and maybe...
you could still kind of have some semblance of a normal life outside of racing.
Yeah. The dollar figures weren't that enormous then.
Yeah, you weren't sharing garage space with your car because that's all you can afford is a storage unit and
but that meant you were camping in your van or you were sleeping in a pup tent in the paddock. But that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Camp out at the racetrack. There's nothing wrong with that.
In fact, the first enclosed trailers that we ever saw came with the IMSA teams when they would come to Lime Rock, and then the support series for that was Formula Atlantic, and that was the most incredible racing in the mid '70s. You've had Villeneuve, Keke Rosberg, Bobby Rahal, Price Cobb, Danny Sullivan. And they were racing at the same races that we're racing at as national Formula Ford racers. Just incredible. But they would show up with enclosed trailers, so we had a little enclosed trailer envy back then.
One day I'll get my enclosed trailer.
I had to make mine, but one day I did.
Yeah. That is. Think about Bobby Rahal. It just remember last year at SEMA, me and my friend, he came down and he helped cover the show for us. Mm-hmm. He drove from Seattle to Salt Lake to pick me up, and then we drove to Vegas. And
wow.
Yeah. He's down for a road trip. He's that guy.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. But we were in the Honda always has one of the biggest booths in the central hall. It's that hall is dominated by Honda, Chevrolet, and up on the central hall there's a lower level and then an upper level. Mm-hmm. And on that upper level, it's a long, narrow booth, but it's Ford. So from the Ford booth, you can kind of look down on the Chevy booth, which I always find hilarious.
There you go.
Yeah. But we were in the Honda booth, and they had a couple of the Honda-powered Indy cars there.
Right.
And we're trying to figure out where we're going to go next. And then we look over, and we see Bobby and Graham Rahal.
Right.
And it seems one of those places where you can kind of, go up and say hi to some people. But it's, I grew up watching Indy.
Mm-hmm.
Like Bobby Rahal's one of those guys. It's like he's...
But he's a super guy and he's super approachable.
Oh yeah, but it was that's everybody. Everything I've heard is like he's super approachable. But it was like me at just under 30 and my buddy who over 30. We just stood there like a couple of skinny teenagers. We're like, it's Bobby Rahal. What do you say to Bobby Rahal?
When I was a young driver, I was like that too. I was pretty shy. And it took me a long time to figure out that if you actually ask people, they might even give you a little hand, or certainly some good advice. And invariably in our sport, people are giving; they're not taking.
Oh yeah.
So I think particularly in the case of Bobby Rahal, he's the president of the Road Racing Drivers Club, the RRDC, and they're doing some fantastic young driver programs now. They have Safe as Fast.
Yeah.
And their videos and their Ask a Driver questionnaires are fantastic, well worth looking at. I'm lucky enough to go to the RRDC meeting at Daytona for the 24 hours. Just about every year I go. It's amazing how the old drivers and team managers and people who've been around the sport for a long time are trying to give back to younger drivers, like Bruno here locally. And we need more Brunos.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see him. Like, I remember just like there's another kid who's going to be racing. Like, not another snow kid. We don't need another. I love the snow children,
Right.
Right. But I'm just thinking like, another kid showing up in another, sport, and then it's Bruno.
Yeah, and it's so fantastic that Bruno has chosen the Formula Car route instead of going with, arguably you could have a longer, better career in a sedan or a sports car or
something like
tin top as our Formula Car guys call them. But no, he's doing the right things. He's in the Mazda Road to Indy program.
Yeah, and he just raced at Laguna Seca and finished on the podium.
Well, he had a second in the first race and a win the second, so he's co-tied in championship.
Yeah, which is unreal for. I mean, we had Madison who won, the Porsche Cup or whatever before he could legally rent a car.
Right.
And now we have Bruno, and it's kind of crazy to specifically Bruno in a Formula car
at 16 years old.
Yeah.
But it's funny. Back at Ligier, the first year in '94, we did a lot of testing with the Benetton drivers. So we had. Johnny Herbert tested for us, Jos Verstappen, Michael Schumacher, and actually Alain Prost did with a white helmet on. But the quickest guy on an outlap going for it that I'd ever worked with at that time was Jos Verstappen, who is Max Verstappen's dad. And here's Max at 17, 18 years old, and at the time when I was, dating myself, but Jos, his dad, was the young up-and-comer.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like 23.
Oh, still, like, those young guys, like, they're hungry, and then, sometimes they don't necessarily make the best decisions, but, Bruno seems special in that he's smart enough to know, to pick and choose his battles. He's not going to... He's like, there's a hole. He's like, no, he knows when the hole is big enough. He knows.
And he has an enormous amount of racing experience from his karting. And that's what it takes now to be successful, is starting young and getting all those... to imprint all of that muscle memory.
Yeah. It just seems kids now, like literally children. There are race weekends when I hear the karts going on, and I look over and it's like 5 and 6 year olds. Right. Like, when I was your age, I was playing, to date myself, I was playing with my Transformers in my living room.
There you go.
It's like that's what I was doing.
Well, there's a progression from Transformers to race cars.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that's something we need to work on here at UMC is how we get youngsters from the karting world into the car world.
Yeah. So
that we develop the next generation of talent.
Yeah, because there are a lot of talented karters out there.
Yes.
There are a great amount of kids out there.
It's somehow we need to, here at the racetrack, we need to develop the stories that are inside the fence here.
Yeah.
And the karting transition to cars would be a great story to develop.
Yeah, because that was when I would have been, starting competitive driving, 17, 18, and whatever $1,000 thing I bought out of the classified ads.
Right.
Because this was before there was no Craigslist, there was no KSL classified.
Sure.
It was, or out of the Auto Trader, the paper Auto Trader that you had to spend $1 on.
Yeah.
That always had some weird ad for
Or you'd be standing at 7-Eleven and the guy would be shooing you away from the magazine. Right?
Yeah, he's like, buy something or get out. It was, you would start doing autocross, and then you would get good enough at that and learn some basics of car control and all that stuff, and why it's not so much fun to stand in a parking lot and watch some dude in a Miata murder every cone on the course, and then you would hopefully make the transition to some smaller road, link up with NASA or SCCA or whoever could get you onto an actual road course. Right. But now it's kids are getting karts and they're karting and they're doing competitive driving before they're even out of elementary school.
Yes.
And then it just seems to kind of stop there. which I find really weird, especially when they're out here at a race weekend. It's like,
right. Yeah, so do I. I don't see any. We share the same paddock, but there seems to be a wall down the middle of it. It's an invisible wall. But,
and I mean, from where they are, you can literally see the race cars that are going out to whichever course they're running.
Right.
So, I mean...
Yeah, that's something that we really need to work on here, is how to develop a dialogue or a path.
Yeah. I mean, that's it's like, hey, if your kid still likes driving on things without fenders or roofs, there are formula cars they can get into. Or, if you would rather him be in something, with a roof and fenders, it's like, Miatas are cheap and plentiful.
Yes, and speaking about that, the impression is that formula cars are very expensive.
No, oh Lord, no.
Yeah, but something like the standard Mazda that Bruno drove so effectively last year, those cars are readily available from anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000. It's a very reliable car.
Yeah, I mean,
and they don't blow up like your Subaru does on
hey. Sean Murphy has hopefully figured that one out.
I hope so.
Or at least if he blows up and starts it on fire, I hope I'm at least there to see it happen. Because I missed him setting his car on fire. I missed Brendan Stewart setting his white...
Oh, did that one go up as well? Yeah.
That went up a couple years ago.
Oh, okay.
And, that's how we got the name Bad Luck Brendan.
Okay.
But...
It is pretty hard and fairly expensive to take a production-based car and make it live on the racetrack.
I mean, even if I'm going to start spec racing, it would be Spec Z if I'm going to do something like that, because it's still fairly new and it's still evolving, but you have to get a 350Z, and you can get them for less than, you can get them for around like $6,000-$7,000, but there's a lot of work you have to put into it.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, if you want a good starting point, you're spending around $10,000, and then you have to do all the things to go from street car to race car.
Exactly.
And that's...
Yeah, it just adds up.
Yeah, at that point, you might as well just buy a formula car.
Yes, but it's hard, there's always been a divide between formula car drivers and sedan or sports car drivers.
Yeah.
Even in the SCCA, it's always been that way.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense, because we're all out here to race and enjoy. Right. But why does there need to be this wall?
Yeah, I don't get it either. But it seems to be there.
Yeah.
But we'll get past it.
Yeah. We'll either climb over that wall or break it down. One of the two. So
I've used up more than my allotted time here.
We got going a little late, but this was... We covered a lot
that's just the...
well, we didn't even talk about you restoring these cars, or how you even got to... We're recording this in Walter Kagan's garage, and we are sitting next to a pair of F1 cars and
Brabham Formula One cars. We have a 1990 Brabham BT59 that David Brabham raced in period, and then a 1992 Brabham BT60 that Damon Hill raced in period.
We have not even, and they're both owned by Walter Kagan, and you're restoring them for him. So, and he runs these on track days, you said.
We've had both cars out. In fact, Walt and his brother Ron have driven both Brabhams on track at the same time. It was quite an emotional experience to have the Kagan Brothers Grand Prix. They had a great time. We hope to do it again when the weather improves.
Yeah.
But, I kind of came about after the heyday of kart and IMSA sports car racing. I'd been doing it for quite a long time. And the new generation of cars were just not that exciting to me anymore, which was the IRL. Sports car racing was doing the WSC that then morphed into the Daytona prototypes. There was this is going to sound horrible, but there was a little too much NASCAR influence in all of the Pro Series at that time.
Nail meet hammer.
Yeah. So I ended up starting a company with Ron Mathis, who was one of my race engineers at Touring Car, a company called SPA Technique. And we became the U.S. importer of SPA design, fire systems, steering wheels, mirrors, safety equipment.
Yeah.
We set up their U.S. Agency in Indianapolis. Ron and I did that for 2 years. Decided that it really wasn't our cup of tea. We were both racers.
Yeah.
And then I took a look at historic racing, which at the time was doing very well. That would have been the early 2000s. And got very actively involved in running a historic race car collection for a Seattle gentleman. At the time, we would restore a car for Pebble Beach every year for the Concours d'Elegance. So my very first restoration project ever for this collection, which we did in-house, I did with Andy Brass, David Smith and myself, was a Ferrari 315S. That was the 1957 Mille Miglia winner with Piero Taruffi driving. So this was a ground-up restoration, which then went to Pebble Beach and won its class and won the Enzo Ferrari Award. That story gets more interesting because in 2007, the Ferrari factory asked for it back to do the Mille Miglia, which is now a tour, 3-day tour. And the car was to be driven by Prisca Taruffi, who is Piero's daughter. So the car was shipped over to the Ferrari factory. I went with it to support. I finally, having written to Enzo Ferrari at 10 years, 40 years later, I'm there with full factory access badging and spending private time with Piero Ferrari with this car that was so historical to the both Taruffi family and to the Ferrari factory. That was the year that it was the last running of the Mille Miglia, 1957, when Di Portego was killed with a tire failure. So we ran the car that we had restored, did 1,000 miles with Prisca driving it, and me running close support in a 599 Fioriano.
Hey, that's a nice little support vehicle.
It was fantastic. It was an exhausting 3 days, but it was a cool experience. But we were very lucky. We did in-house. The collection was Cavallino Holdings. I did the Peter Collins DB3S Aston Martin car, the factory car. I did a Ford GT40 Roadster, one of 4 ever made, original batch. Ferrari TR59, which was the Sebring winner in 1959 with Dan Gurney. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed doing the restoration work, kind of one major project a year. Plus we did a lot of vintage racing. We always raced at Historics in Monterey. We had Lister Chevys, Lister Jaguars, Ferrari 250 LM, as well as doing all of the tours. So it was a fantastic collection. And at that time I was actually living in Salt Lake, here for the skiing in the mountains, and commuting to Seattle for the collection about 200 days a year. I burnt myself out.
Yeah. Spending 2/3 of a year.
Yeah, on the road. And it was tough. But, and that led to me trying for the last, since 2010, just trying to maintain a local presence here at Miramar Sports Park, now UMC, looking after local clients and trying to stay home. Yeah. And race. I've enjoyed racing again for the last 5 seasons.
Oh, yeah. That's always a good thing anytime you can get out there. But, I think you've done some mighty fine work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a cool project I'm doing now under contract. I'm restoring the 1990 Alain Prost Ferrari Formula One car.
Yeah.
Commuting out to Wisconsin to do that, and looking forward to seeing that operational probably in May of this year.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah. One of the things, we talked about Dominic Dobson and doing Indy together and sports car racing together, and one of the most, we've had a 30-year friendship. We've done a lot of projects together. But he decided last spring that he wanted to do Pikes Peak. It was kind of the bucket list. So
that's
once again, I get the call, and it's a friends and family team. We had all volunteers, but we took a Radical SR8 sports racing car. The Radical people in England had a cage in kit form that they sent to us, so we modified it to Pikes Peak specs. Took it to Pikes Peak and listened to what all of the old guys had to say about how to do it properly. Did it as they said. Ended up winning the Unlimited class and took Rookie of the Year.
Well, the old guys tend to know a thing or two.
It was fun. Yeah. It was fun. And it was all volunteer, and we had a great time doing it. Yeah.
Well, that's...
Yeah.
Yeah, go right ahead. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up.
Okay.
So,
well, Michael, thank you.
No, thank you. Really appreciate it. And
how I won the war.
Exactly.